All right, so this tool is going to help you determine what your monthly rental for a rank and rent property should be, and it's based on the volume of calls that you get. So we're also going to provide you with two other options that you can present to potential renters of your site. If they don't want to do a monthly rental option, you can also offer them a pay per lead option, and you can divide pay per lead into qualified calls or all calls. So basically the way this works is you're going to have to start with an estimated lead rate. To get that, you can either look at the CPC of things, or you can do some research into what leads are going for. So for instance, maybe for a dental lead, you'll be getting $20 per lead. For a roofing lead, maybe it would be more something like $50 per lead. So we start with a lead rate of $20 by default, but you can update it by clicking on it and then adjusting it. And you can see, so if you're charging $50 per lead and you know you're generating about 30 calls, that gives you a base monthly rental rate of those 30 calls of about $1,500 per month. And then you can see we also show you at 40 calls, 50 calls, 60 calls, 80 calls, but you can edit any of these values if you want to look at something like 10 calls, 25 calls, 50 calls, 75 calls, 100 calls. You can edit any of these values, okay? And that'll just give you what your rental value should be on a monthly rental option based on your lead rate. Now, if your customer is going to go on a monthly rental rate, I highly suggest that you frame them that up to a certain amount of calls, you're going to charge a certain amount of money, and when they reach the next threshold, that billing will go up. It's pretty simple. It's if I drive you more calls, you will have to pay more money. So I suggest you do that. If they don't like that sort of idea, you can then present a pay per lead option of I'll charge you only for the calls you receive, or I'll charge you only for the calls that you receive that last over a minute. Now with pay per lead, especially pay per qualified lead, make sure to read these tooltips. Just hover over them because there is important information about things you do want to do and not want to do with a pay per lead system. But typically a pay per lead, I'm going to set this back to 20. A pay per lead is going to be a little bit more expensive than a monthly rental option, and that's one of the benefits of using a monthly rental option. So if I set this back to the default values, and I'll just refresh the page to do that, okay, you can see that if you're charging about $20 per lead and you're generating, let's say 40 calls per month, or even 50 calls per month, there's your $1,000 per month value based on, I'm sending you 50 calls, I'm charging about $20 per call. You know, the site's generating around 50 calls, I want $1,000 per month. If they're like, look, I don't like that, then you can move to a pay per lead. But typically the lead rate is going to increase because they're not going to answer all their calls, or there's going to be all kinds of things that are going on. Typically they're not answering their calls, where you're not getting the value out of your site that you should, so you have to raise the lead rate. So you can see, for example, if you want to get about the same amount of money, you would be generating 25 calls at $40 per month. But if your site is generating 50 calls, okay, and you want to show them the difference, you can change this to 50, and you can say, look, you can rent it off me monthly for $1,000, or if you want to go to a pay per lead model, those same 50 calls that we're currently generating is going to cost about twice as much, which really pushes for the monthly rental volume. But the nice thing for a client about a pay per lead is that they're really only paying for phone calls they receive without worrying about monthly rental options being one price for all calls. And this can fluctuate up and down. Obviously, if one month you get 50 calls and the next month you get 80 calls, your invoices are going to change. So that provides a little bit more complexity for you to be able to invoice after the fact, because your invoices are going to be changing up and down. So the last option, and pay per lead basically is just you're paying, or the client would be paying for all calls that are generated. And then a pay per qualified lead is another option where you're only charging the client for calls that last over 1 minute. Now you have to be very careful with this type of charge, because typically what I found is when they go to a pay per qualified lead, they will try to qualify the people that are calling that number very quickly and try and get them off the phone, because they know they're going to be charged if it lasts over a minute. So it's something you have to decide if you want to do, if you want to stick to the monthly or pay per lead. or if you even want to offer a pay-per-qualified lead. But once again, qualified leads, because they're qualified, they're lasting over a minute on the phone or whatever you determine as a time length, the rate has to go up again. Okay, so if we change this to around 16, you can see only 16 calls at $60 per qualified lead amounts to close to $1,000. So you can see how the lead rates go down and down. So this calculator will help give you an idea of what your rental value should be based on the volume of calls that you're getting and based on the lead rate that you think is basically good for your niche. So like I said, if it's just, lawn cutters, they're not going to pay a lot, but if it's something like metal roofing, they'll obviously be willing to pay more for a lead. And then once you determine your monthly rental value, that'll really help you adjust your pay per lead model and pay per qualified lead model so that you have a lot of information for your clients before you talk to them.